On New Year's Eve, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I doubled over, gritting my teeth, feeling as if my stomach was turning inside out. My vision blurred as waves of dizziness washed over me. Weakly leaning against the wall, I felt my stomach spasm as large beads of sweat rolled down my forehead. I had been feeling unwell since this morning, but I had pushed through the discomfort. Spending the day doing housework, hoping to prepare a warm meal for the family tonight. It might be my stomach acting up again. "Could you take me to the hospital?" I managed to squeeze out these words through clenched teeth, clutching my belly. "No way. Take a cab yourself. I'm at a crucial point in my game, I don't have time." Gavin Cromwell waved his hand impatiently, as if I were some sort of plague he couldn't wait to avoid. My heart felt as if it had been pricked by needles, aching with each beat. After 5 years of marriage, I had given him everything. Yet in the end, in his eyes, I was less important than a video game. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. I took a deep breath, trying to keep myself calm. I knew I couldn't count on him anymore. Stumbling to the door, I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called the ambulance. "Hello, emergency services?" I managed to say through the pain. After hanging up, I leaned against the wall and slowly made my way to the sofa in the living room, waiting for the ambulance to arrive. My mother-in-law came out of her room and, seeing me pale and weak on the sofa, asked irritably, "What's wrong with you?" "It's New Year's Eve, who are you putting on that face for?" I weakly explained, "Mom, my stomach hurts. It might be my gastritis acting up." "I've already called the ambulance." Her face immediately darkened at this. "Stomach pain? You're just being dramatic. I bet you're faking it. Always causing trouble," she said, giving me a disgusted look as if I were a harbinger of misfortune. Fighting through the pain, I tried to explain, "Mom, I really don't feel well. I'm not faking." "Oh, enough of your act. Get up and make dinner. The whole family is waiting to eat," she snapped, cutting me off. At that moment, my 5-year-old daughter Lily came running out of her room. Seeing my pale face, she showed no concern. Instead, she complained, "Mummy, what's wrong with you? Are you sick again? I'm supposed to go to my friend's house tomorrow morning." Hearing my daughter's words, my heart sank completely. After all the love and care I'd given her, I was still less important than her playdates. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears welling up in my eyes. I knew that in this house, no one cared whether I lived or died. I didn't want to stay in this cold, uncaring home for another second. I went straight downstairs, where the biting wind felt like knives on my face. I pulled my coat tighter, feeling cold to my very core. The ambulance arrived quickly, and as it pulled away, I watched the house that had become so alien to me recede into the distance. Looking out at the rapidly passing scenery, my heart was filled with despair and resolve. I lay on the emergency room bed after receiving a pain injection, feeling some relief from the pain in my stomach. The hospital was full of patients, each accompanied by family members. No one complained about falling ill on New Year's Eve. Instead, they were all speaking words of comfort to their loved ones. Except for me. I felt like a helpless ghost, drifting in this cold world alone. The doctors in the emergency department were all busy, and with it being New Year's Eve, they were short-staffed. Many offices only had one doctor on call. I had to go pay for tests and examinations myself, each step feeling like torture. After finally completing the tests, I dragged my heavy steps to the doctor's office with my results, only to find several people already queuing. My stomach pain was getting worse, and my vision was blurring. I had to lean against the wall just to stay upright. "Are you all right?" a gentle voice asked beside me. I looked up to see a young nurse, her eyes full of concern as she looked at me. My stomach hurts," I said weakly, feeling drained of all energy. "Here, let me help you sit down," the nurse said, supporting me as we walked to a nearby chair. I couldn't straighten up from the pain, and large beads of sweat rolled down my forehead. "What happened? Where's your family?" the nurse asked caringly as she wiped my brow. My throat felt blocked. I wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. I bit my lip as tears blurred my vision. Seeing my state, the nurse didn't press further. Before we married, my husband was wonderful to me. After we married, I got pregnant, and he took even better care of me. This made me feel secure enough to quit my job and stay home with our child. But gradually, everything changed. My husband's caring words turned to sarcasm and criticism. And I went from being a lively, outgoing girl to a quiet, withdrawn housewife. I felt like a caged animal, having lost both my freedom and my happiness. Just then, my phone rang. I took it out and saw it was my husband calling. I hesitated, but answered. "Where are you? Why aren't you home cooking yet? It's almost midnight, can't you be reliable for once?" My husband's voice sounded very impatient. My heart sank, a chill running from my feet to my head. Forcing back my hurt and anger, I tried to reply calmly, "I'm at the hospital." "Hospital? What are you doing there? Faking illness again?" His tone grew even more irritated. "Look, don't try to slack off. Get home and make dinner now." He had clearly forgotten that I had called an ambulance to come to the hospital. In his mind, there was only his game. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. They spilled over. I bit my lip hard to keep from sobbing out loud. Beep, beep, beep. The call ended. I lowered the phone, feeling cold all over. The nurse looked at me, her eyes full of sympathy and concern. She said nothing, just gently held my hand. "Thank you." I choked out. The nurse smiled and said, "Don't mention it. You rest here, I'll go get the doctor for you." With that, she turned and left. I sat alone in the chair, tears falling silently. I closed my eyes, feeling nothing but darkness. "Wake up, wake up." A voice called near my ear. I opened my eyes groggily to see a blurry figure. My mind felt like scattered sand, light and floating, yet heavy at the same time. The smell of disinfectant stung my nose, making my throat itch. I tried to move my fingers and felt a tingling numbness. I turned my head with effort. "Where am I?" "You're in the ward, ma'am. Your stomach ulcer is very serious. We need to perform laparoscopic gastric resection surgery. We need a family member to sign the consent form." So, the foredrip fell drop by drop, tapping against my fragile nerves. I felt like a fish out of water, lying helplessly on the hospital bed, consumed by loneliness and fear. My chest felt tight. I struggled to sit up but found I had no strength. As if all energy had been drained from me. "I'll sign it myself." The doctor was clearly taken aback by my words, but he handed me the surgical consent form. As I entered the operating theater, it was just striking midnight. I could imagine the city outside lit up with fireworks and celebration. I tried calling Gavin, but there was no answer after many rings. Not giving up, I sent Gavin a message saying I was going into surgery. 2 hours later, the surgery was over. I was still alone. The on-duty nurse must have felt sorry for me being alone. Since it wasn't busy in the early hours, she came to check on me periodically. The next morning, the silence in the ward was broken by a phone vibration. I struggled to reach for my phone. The screen flashed "husband." Seeing those words, my heart felt like it was being pricked by a needle. A wave of bitterness washed over me. He finally remembered me? I stared at the screen, letting the phone vibrate. Finally the vibrating stopped, and the ward fell silent again. I closed my eyes, letting tears fall silently. I felt like an abandoned child, lying alone on the cold hospital bed. The phone rang again. "Would you like me to answer it for you?" A gentle voice asked beside me, like a warm ray of light illuminating my cold heart. I nodded weakly. The nurse picked up my phone and answered the call. "Hello? What are you doing? Why aren't you answering the phone? My mom's hungry, aren't you coming home to cook?" My husband's impatient voice came through the phone, like a sharp knife stabbing into my heart. The pain was so intense I could barely breathe. I bit my lip hard to keep from crying out. "She can't come to the phone right now," the nurse said calmly, but with a hint of authority in her voice. Can't come to the phone? What do you mean? Didn't she just go for a checkup? What's the big deal? My mom's waiting at home for dinner. Gavin's voice was full of anger and confusion, like a provoked beast about to explode. She just had surgery. You're her husband, you didn't even come to be with her, and you're demanding she come home to cook? Are you even human? The nurse berated Gavin indignantly. Surgery? What surgery? Why would she need surgery when she was fine? My husband's voice suddenly rose several octaves, sounding more like an interrogation than concern. The nurse seemed shocked, as if she couldn't believe husbands like this still existed. Are you really her husband? Who are you anyway? Let her come to the phone. My mom's waiting at home for dinner. Tell her to come back right away. Gavin's voice grew impatient again, buzzing in my ear like an annoying fly. Gavin hung up. The nurse listened to the dial tone, her face full of disbelief. Don't get upset. Your health is the most important thing right now. The nurse hesitated before uttering these words, which sounded so feeble. I nodded, forcing a smile that looked worse than crying, to show I understood. After the doctor came on duty, he performed a post-operative checkup. Fortunately, the surgery was timely, and now I only needed some IV drips and 2 days of hospital observation. In the morning, I lay in the hospital bed. The nurse came to check on me several times. Her face full of unspoken words, probably truly shocked by my condition. And I was just as shocked myself. In the afternoon, Gavin still came, even bringing a thermos. I thought he had a change of heart, but his next words plunged me into hell. He walked to my bedside and placed the thermos on the nightstand. Eat up, I made you some porridge. Gavin paused, then added. Hurry and eat, if you're feeling all right, you should go home soon. There's a pile of work waiting for you at home. Go home? I repeated, my tone full of sarcasm. Ha! I laughed coldly, turning my head away from him. The anesthesia had worn off, and my lower abdomen was throbbing with pain. But it was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. I gritted my teeth, beads of sweat forming on my forehead. Gavin, while looking at his phone, started complaining. You should have said something when you got sick, instead of letting it get this serious. If I had known you were really ill, I would have brought you to the hospital myself. I didn't want to waste my breath arguing with him, so I just closed my eyes tiredly. Gavin's phone rang. It was his mother calling. Mom, yes, I'm at the hospital. Elaine? Elaine just had surgery, she's lying here. Gavin continued chatting with his mother for a while, but I no longer wanted to listen. After hanging up, Gavin looked at me. You really can't go home? If I could get up right now, I'd really want to beat him to death with a stick. Seeing no response from me, Gavin looked disgusted. Well, rest up then. You're not doing any work at home anyway, just lazing about. Gavin finished speaking and turned to leave. As I watched his back about to disappear through the doorway, I suddenly spoke up, Gavin. He stopped and turned to look at me. Let's. My throat felt dry, get a divorce. Divorce? Are you joking? He sneered as if he'd heard the funniest joke ever, his eyes filled with undisguised contempt. Who would want you like this? With a kid in tow, what man would be stupid enough to? I didn't catch the rest of what he said, nor did I want to. A surge of anger rose from the depths of my heart, making my vision blur. I took a deep breath, fighting off the dizziness, and interrupted him through gritted teeth. Gavin, you truly disgust me. His expression changed as he looked down at me, his eyes turning sinister. What did you say? Say that again. I said you disgust me. I met his gaze fearlessly, enunciating each word with force. You selfish, cold-hearted man, even looking at you for a second makes me feel dirty. His face turned from white to green, then to purple. He suddenly lunged towards me, grabbing my shoulders with such force I felt my bones might break. You'd better behave yourself and stop causing trouble. He violently let go of my hands, turned around and slammed the door shut, leaving me alone in the hospital room, shaking all over. The pain in my shoulders came in waves, as if branded by a hot iron. I clenched my jaw, trying hard not to make a sound. I leaned back against the headboard, powerless, as tears silently fell. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my rapidly heaving chest. The wound sent waves of tearing pain, making even breathing a careful task. The next morning, I was woken by a commotion. Last night, the post-operative pain was severe, and I barely slept. Thanks to that kind nurse, who stayed to look after me for half the night after her shift ended. Eventually, I felt too guilty to trouble her further and insisted she go home. The kind nurse had arranged for her colleague on the next shift to look after me. I struggled to open my eyes and saw Gavin standing by the bed, holding a thermos. Why has he come again? I no longer believed he had a change of heart overnight and came to see me out of remorse. My mom's here. She brought you some chicken soup. My heart tightened, a sense of foreboding washing over me. My mother-in-law, what is she doing here? Before I could say anything, the door to the room was pushed open. And in came my mother-in-law, along with my daughter. Oh, dear Elaine, it's just a minor surgery. Why haven't you been discharged yet? Her voice dripped with sarcasm, sounding much like a clucking hen. My throat was sore, and I didn't want to speak. But I was afraid she might cause a scene in the hospital. Mom, the doctor said they need to keep me under observation for a few days. Observation? Sounds like they just want to squeeze more money out of us. She jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, her voice rising several octaves. What's the point of staying? Let's get you discharged right away. You can recover at home just fine. As I listened to her caustic voice, anger surged within me. I had reached my limit. There was no need to endure this any longer. Ignoring the throbbing pain from my wound, I sneered. Mom, the hospital is much quieter than home. At least I don't have to listen to certain people's constant nagging all day long. As soon as the words left my mouth, the air seemed to freeze. I could clearly feel the fury radiating from her eyes, as well as the stiff smile on Gavin's face. You. She pointed at me, her finger trembling. Looking at her enraged expression, I felt no satisfaction, only endless fatigue. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Gavin's tone lost its earlier pleasantness. Elaine, Mom's just concerned about you. How could you speak to her like that? My mother-in-law snorted coldly, turning her head away and muttering something about ungrateful under her breath. Though quiet, her words were loud enough for me to hear clearly. I now understood that the mother and son hadn't come out of concern for me at all. They probably just wanted to confirm whether I was truly ill or merely skiving off. At this moment, my daughter, who had been silent until now, looked up. Mom, are you feeling better? My eyes welled up with tears. At least my daughter cared about me. But her next words opened up a chasm between us. I was supposed to go to my friend's house to play today, but I can't because you're in hospital. The warmth in my eyes hadn't even dissipated before a wave of sorrow washed over me. Was this really my daughter? My heart felt as if it were being squeezed by an icy hand, the pain unbearable. The three of them didn't stay long. Once they confirmed I wasn't faking my illness. They said relatives were coming to visit and they needed to return home to entertain them. They even complained that my illness came at an inconvenient time, leaving no one at home to cook. Once again, I was left alone in the hospital room. I felt like a lonely soul abandoned in a dark corner of the world. In this cold family where no one cared about my feelings or my well-being. In the morning, the doctor performed one final checkup and said I could be discharged, advising me to rest at home. Standing at the hospital entrance, reflecting on the events of the past few days, Gavin's attitude towards me. My daughter's indifference, the cold wind blew, leaving me clear-headed yet numb. What should I do now? Should I continue serving this heartless family, or... Beep beep. A taxi pulled up in front of me. The car stopped at the entrance of the estate. I paid the fare and walked towards home. I had nothing left to cherish in this marriage, but there were still my belongings in the house. I couldn't let those heartless people have them for free. As I approached the door, I faintly heard my mother-in-law's voice, as bitter and harsh as ever. Really, spending so much money, who knows if it's even useful? A woman who doesn't know how to take care of her husband, only knows how to spend money. I sighed helplessly and pushed the door open. My mother-in-law was sitting on the sofa, vividly describing my crimes to a relative. while my daughter sat nearby watching cartoons, oblivious to my arrival. Seeing me, she froze for a moment, her face instantly turning sour. Oh, finally decided to come back from the hospital? Just knows how to slack off. Suppressing my discomfort, I said calmly. Mom, I've been discharged. The doctor said I can recover at home. Recover at home? Who's going to take care of you? Gavin? Or me? I'm telling you, I don't have the time for that. My mother-in-law rolled her eyes, her tone full of disdain. I can take care of myself, I said, not wanting to argue, just wanting to go to my room. Take care of yourself? What can you do? Laundry? Cooking? Or looking after the child? Don't think I don't know, you're just lazy and good for nothing. I turned around abruptly to see my mother-in-law glaring at me fiercely. Her finger still poised to jab at me, like a sharp claw ready to tear me apart. At that moment, I really wanted to take out my phone and capture her ugly face. To let the whole world see how she treats a patient who's just been discharged from hospital. I slammed the door shut, blocking out her nauseating face. I took out my clothes from the wardrobe, along with some jewelry I had bought before marriage. I had married far from home and hadn't been back to my parents since having the child. Gavin always said we'd go when the child was older, but now that wasn't going to happen. Still weak from the surgery, I started feeling sharp pains in my abdomen after packing for a while and had to sit on the bed to rest. Looking at the mess before me, I began to reflect on this failed marriage and my future path. Did I really want to live like this for the rest of my life? No, absolutely not. I want a divorce. I want to start my life anew. I found the lawyer's contact in my social media that the kind nurse had recommended to me at the hospital. The nurse had been very helpful, and when she learned I wanted a divorce, she proactively introduced me to her lawyer friend. I typed a brief message, "Hello, Mr. Johnson, I'd like to consult you about some legal matters regarding divorce." After sending the message, my heart was in suspense, anxiously waiting for a reply. Every second seemed excruciatingly long. I could almost hear my own heartbeat. The moment the phone screen lit up, I clicked on it almost impatiently. "Hello, what would you like to consult about?" These simple words made me see hope. I started typing, telling the solicitor about my marital situation and my demands in detail. The reply came quickly. Mr. Johnson's professionalism and patience made me feel at ease. I understand your situation broadly. We can set up a time to meet and discuss in detail. I will formulate the most suitable plan based on your specific circumstances. All right, thank you. I replied, feeling full of anticipation. I could almost see that with the lawyer's help, I would finally be able to break free from all this. Fight for my rightful interests, and start my life anew. Due to my physical condition, I couldn't travel long distances to visit my parents' home for a while. Fortunately, Gavin, my mother-in-law, and our daughter left for their hometown to visit relatives in the afternoon, giving me some time to rest. Before they left, they did check on me in the bedroom. Gavin initially wanted me to drive, but he gave up the idea after I showed him the wound on my belly. After the three of them left, the house finally fell into silence, just like my heart, still as dead water. In the morning, Mr. Johnson called me to arrange a meeting. At the cafe, I informed him of my requests. I had no fixed income after marriage and didn't want custody of the child. However, my parents had paid the down payment for our marital home. So I only wanted the house or its current cash value. After I finished speaking, he pushed up his glasses and said in a steady tone, "Ms. Turner, I understand your situation. While I personally support you, legally speaking, you'll need to provide some evidence, such as proof of the down payment or transfer records." I was taken aback. My parents had given Gavin cash at the time, so there were no transfer records. And the down payment was deducted from Gavin's bank account. This was quite unfavorable for my case. Upon learning this, Mr. Johnson pondered for a moment. "Then we need to find other evidence, such as whether your husband has had an extramarital affair, domestic violence, or any serious misconduct." His words struck me like a bolt of lightning, as if parting clouds to reveal clear skies. I felt like I had grasped a glimmer of hope. An affair? I had suspected it before. In the past 6 months, Gavin's business dinners and trips had become more frequent. He often came home late, carrying an unfamiliar perfume scent. I had questioned him, but Gavin always had seemingly perfect excuses, without a single flaw. I quickly asked Mr. Johnson how to investigate. He patiently explained that I could start by examining my husband's communication records, spending habits, and daily behavior for any anomalies. Mr. Johnson handed me a business card for a private investigator. A private investigator? Of course! Why hadn't I thought of that? But another problem stumped me: money. The fees for the lawyer came from what I had scrimped and saved from the living expenses Gavin gave me over the years. Hiring a private investigator as well would really stretch me thin. I remembered I still had a few pieces of jewelry I bought before marriage. If worst came to worst, I could sell them. I was determined to fight this case. Mr. Johnson, about the investigator's fee, Don't worry, he's a friend of mine. You can pay me together after the case is settled. I'm confident I can win this case for you. I thanked Mr. Johnson profusely. When I returned home, Gavin and the others hadn't come back yet. In previous years, they would have returned by this afternoon, but not today. It was just as well. I didn't want to see them anyway. I contacted the private investigator and provided some information. I had nothing left to lose, so I might as well go all in. The investigator's news came quickly. By morning, the information had been sent to me. When I opened it, I nearly lost my breath, my heart aching. I had thought Gavin might be having an affair or a fling at most, but I never imagined it would be so explosive. Gavin's mistress was pregnant with his child, due next month. The reason they didn't return last night as they had in previous years was that they went to see the mistress. Looking at the photos the investigator sent me, I was shocked to see our daughter among them, smiling ingratiatingly at that woman. I felt a wave of nausea, my stomach churning. This was too much to swallow. That evening, Gavin and his two companions finally deigned to return home. As soon as Gavin entered, he exclaimed, "I'm starving. Why isn't dinner ready? Elaine, are you dead or something? Didn't I text you this afternoon saying we'd be back for dinner?" I was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by a pile of photographs. "Gavin, don't you have anything to explain to me?" I asked. Gavin's face turned pale when he saw the photos. The sudden turn of events seemed to have caught him off guard, and he appeared slightly flustered. "You've been investigating me?" My mother-in-law, on the other hand, remained remarkably composed. She snatched up the photos and said, "What's the big deal? Elaine, since you know now, we might as well come clean. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not being able to give birth to a son. If it weren't for your inability to have more children, would Gavin have needed to cheat and have a child with another woman?" I was truly speechless, feeling as if my entire worldview had been shattered and rebuilt. "Don't you know why I can't have any more children?" I asked. 2 years after giving birth to our daughter, I had become pregnant again. At that time, Gavin's treatment of me was still relatively normal. So I didn't think much of it when I became pregnant again. But my mother-in-law had heard of some herbal concoction from who knows where, claiming it would guarantee a boy. I didn't believe in it, but she secretly added it to my soup. I was already over 5 months pregnant at the time. It not only caused me to miscarry but also led to severe uterine bleeding, leaving me unable to have any more children. Thinking back, it was from that year onwards that Gavin's attitude towards me began to deteriorate day by day. My mother-in-law was frightened by the look in my eyes and stammered, unable to form a coherent response. Gavin looked at me coldly and asked, "Elaine, what exactly do you want?" "I want a divorce," I declared. Gavin reacted as if he just heard a joke. He plopped down on the sofa, crossing his legs, and said, "A divorce? Elaine, who do you think you are? Last time you mentioned divorce, I thought you were just ill and in a bad mood. Think about it, who would want you if you left me? Besides, me finding another woman to have a child with is for your own good. We can give you the son to raise, and he'll take care of you in your old age. Before Gavin could finish, I burst out laughing. So it's true that when people are rendered utterly speechless, they really do laugh. Gavin, your calculations are so transparent, they're practically slapping me in the face, I said. You have a child with another woman and expect me to raise it? Do you really think I'm your nanny? Even nannies get paid. Have you given me any money? Is your whole family not fully evolved? How can you have such absurd ideas? Dad, just get the divorce, our daughter chimed in. I want Auntie Amy to be my mom anyway. She's rich and pretty. Look at her every time she comes to my school for parent-teacher meetings. I feel embarrassed. Slap. My hand struck our Lily's face. Our daughter burst into tears. Gavin jumped to his feet. Elaine, are you out of your mind? How dare you hit Lily? My mother-in-law rushed over, pulling our daughter close. Lily, are you all right? She then turned to me, shouting, You wretched woman, you're really. Shut up, you old hag, or I'll slap you too. I snapped. More than Gavin's and my mother-in-law's lack of compassion, it was my daughter's attitude that broke my heart the most. I had raised her bit by bit, and now she complained that I was old and poor. I truly regretted giving birth to such a child. Seeing how I spoke to his mother, the fury in Gavin's eyes looked as if it could burn me alive. He raised his hand to slap me. I had time to dodge the slap, but I didn't. I took it head on. Gavin had put all his strength into it. The slap made me see stars, and it took several seconds before I could regain my composure. Well done, Gavin. Not only are you a cheater, but you're also abusive. I glanced at the hidden camera I had placed behind the potted plant. The angle was perfect, surely it had captured everything. My daughter's cries continued as I collapsed onto the floor. Gavin pointed his finger at me. Elaine, hitting Lily, insulting my mother, you must have a death wish. Look at yourself in the mirror. Do you really think you're in any position to ask for a divorce? At this point, I have nothing more to say. Remember this, I'm the one divorcing you, Elaine. The child and all the assets are mine. You can just get lost. Gavin's spit flew as he spoke. Looking at his face, ugly with anger. I couldn't connect it with the man who had once knelt before me, proposing marriage. Back then, he said he would love me for a lifetime. Now, he wanted me to leave with nothing. Indeed, trusting a man ruins your entire life. Gavin, we will definitely get divorced, but the one leaving with nothing will be you. I declared. I got up from the floor, picked up the luggage I had already packed, and left this nauseating home without looking back. After leaving home, I checked into a nearby hotel and sent all the photos and home videos to Mr. Johnson, my lawyer. During this time, I wasn't idle. I sold all my pre-marriage jewelry and used the money to pay off the lawyer and private investigator fees in advance. I even gave the private investigators some extra money, asking them to investigate all the money Gavin had spent on his mistress over the years. From luxury handbags to daily snacks, these were all marital assets that Gavin had spent during our marriage, and I had the right to reclaim them. This investigation revealed something shocking. Except for the first year of our marriage, Gavin had been lying to me about his salary all along. The company he now works for has become one of the world's top 500. And as a project manager, he earns over $100,000 salary every month. Yet, he only gave me $3,000 a month for living expenses, sometimes even less. And I naively believed him, pinching pennies every day. Looking at these truths, I wanted to rush to him and stab him. Staring at the photos and videos in my hand, I couldn't help but have an evil thought. I wanted him to know that the price of betraying our marriage was more than he could bear. When I received Gavin's call, I wasn't surprised at all. I had sent the divorce papers to his company by courier, and importantly, they were sent from the court. I knew he wouldn't easily agree to my demands, so I went straight for a lawsuit. After all, my demands were simple: the house would be mine, assets split equally. And I didn't want custody of the child. Gavin's voice came roaring through the phone, Elaine Turner, don't push it too far. If you keep making these unreasonable demands, I might just refuse to divorce you. What can you do if I drag this out forever? Although I no longer had feelings for Gavin, seeing his attitude still left me feeling cold. Gavin, since you're being like this, we have nothing more to discuss. I'll give you one last chance. Will you sign the divorce papers or not? Elaine, you're dreaming. You won't take anything from me. Fine, if that's how it is, the next thing couriered to your company won't be as simple as divorce papers. I had made up my mind. If he didn't agree, I would expose him at his company. The only reason I hadn't done so immediately was that I feared he might feel he had nothing left to lose and become reckless. Elaine! You wouldn't dare. Gavin, I'm no longer the woman you can push around. Let me tell you, Gavin, I have enough evidence to ruin you completely. I could leave you penniless, but considering we were once in love, I'm only asking for what I'm entitled to. Gavin, think about your son who's about to be born. Do you want him to be labeled as an illegitimate child from birth? Or to have nothing to eat or wear? Go ahead and drag this out with me. Every word I said hit Gavin where it hurt the most. In the end, the call ended with Gavin's silence. I sat on the hotel bed, clutching my phone. No one knows how agitated I was. Even 5 minutes later, my hand holding the phone was still trembling slightly. I lay down on the bed, tears involuntarily flowing from the corners of my eyes. But my heart felt much lighter. I never imagined there would be a day when Gavin and I would be at such odds with each other. But I knew Gavin wouldn't give in so easily, and I was fully prepared. This would be a tough battle, but I wasn't afraid. I went to the hospital for a checkup. As I was leaving the hospital, a pregnant woman blocked my path. I had considered thousands of possibilities. Imagined Gavin being stubborn or trying to intimidate or bribe me, but I never thought of this possibility. In the hospital lobby, Amy Clark and I sat on the benches with an empty seat between us. Amy was Gavin Cromwell's mistress. I couldn't believe Gavin would send a pregnant woman to confront me. Amy was indeed young and beautiful, with a good temperament, just as my daughter had described. She looked even better than in the photos the private investigator had taken for me. You should know why I'm here to see you, Amy said, her tone immediately haughty. I finally understood why she and Gavin had gotten together. Birds of a feather flock together. I glanced up at the security cameras in the lobby, making sure they could capture us. I didn't want anything unpredictable to happen at this critical moment. How could I possibly know why you're looking for me? Surely you haven't come to apologize? Even if you had the conscience for that, I wouldn't forgive you, I replied. Amy hadn't expected me to be so calm. She probably thought I was just a plain-faced housewife she could push around. Touching her belly, Amy quickly regained her superior demeanor. I don't need your forgiveness. In love, the one who isn't loved is the third wheel, and that's you. Why should I apologize to you? I couldn't help but laugh. Have you been brainwashed? How can you say such nonsense? If you have something important to say, get on with it. If not, leave now. Don't waste my time. I don't think we're in any position to sit down for a friendly chat. I stood up to leave. Amy finally got to the point. Gavin showed me your divorce agreement. I don't agree with it. I can give you $100,000. You'd better take it while you can, or you'll end up with nothing. I'll make sure you can't survive in the city. Amy's threat made me turn around. She sat there, watching me turn, her expression smug and arrogant. Fine, I'll wait for you to make that happen. Go back and tell Gavin he's missed his chance, I said, then turned and walked away. Gavin, you really don't know when to quit. Tomorrow is the end of Gavin's company's annual leave, and it's also the day Gavin will be kicked out of the company. I've posted videos of Gavin's affair and domestic violence on the company's internal forum. Along with that, he'll be served with a court summons. I've left the subsequent legal proceedings entirely to Mr. Johnson. With the evidence complete, Gavin will be left with nothing. As for our daughter's custody and visitation rights, Gavin thought I would care. After the court's decision came out, he called me, threatening to prevent me from seeing our daughter. I promptly transferred him $100,000, telling him it was a buyout fee for our daughter's custody rights. But the rights I was buying out weren't visitation rights. They were to sever our mother-daughter relationship completely. Years later, I had my own small company and no shortage of suitors. But my dead heart would never beat for anyone again. By chance, I learned news of Gavin. He had married Amy and indeed had a son. Gavin had started a small business too. His business acumen was decent, and they lived comfortably. However, later when his precious son was injured and needed a blood transfusion, they discovered the child wasn't Gavin's. Their once comfortable life instantly turned chaotic. Amy had already transferred most of his assets early on, and after the incident, she fled with the child. I didn't want to know what happened after that. As for Lily, without anyone to care for or discipline her, she became a delinquent, ending up in the police station several times. Her life was thoroughly ruined. When I heard this news, I felt that karma comes around, heaven spares no one, and evil deeds will always be repaid. But none of this matters to me anymore. I lift my head and feel the sunlight falling on me, warm and embracing. Everything in the past is like yesterday's withered flowers, long since losing its original meaning. I'm no longer that humble, forbearing housewife. I'm a brand new, free Elaine Turner. Now I have the life I want and my dreams. As for their misfortunes, they're none of my concern.